And aloha! Welcome to the Blue Note Fan Report. I'm Guy, the Hawaii Blues fan, and I'm your host on the program that's by a fan, for the fan, and you absolutely know all about you, the fan. Last week, we had this amazing sit-down interview with Garry Unger that went so long that we had to record it again or do more. So this is part 2 of Garry Unger. And instead of being joined by Rob today, I'm going to be joined by Jeremy, the Fox Miller from the Fox. And please give a great big welcome back to the Golden Rocket, the original Golden Rocket, Mr. Garry Unger. Garry, welcome back to the show, sir. How are you?
Well, I wish I was in Hawaii with you.
Well, you know what? I kind of wish I was in where you're at or in St. Louis, to be honest with you, because, you know, I love my hockey and there ain't much of it here. The last interview we did with you was just fantastic, and I appreciate it. It was so intimate. And we kind of left off with the accident at your farm with Garry Unger. And I hated leaving there, but it was just, I mean, it was so emotional. So let's kind of continue from there. So after this accident, and you talked about the young boy that had said, do you know where you're going to spend your eternity, and how that was a watershed moment. Can you continue on with that and how that affected your play and your tenure in St. Louis? Well,
you know, when you're 26, 27, 28 years old and you're playing in the National Hockey League, and the toughest guy you're playing with is Bobby Gassoff. I mean, he's the toughest guy that I've ever been with on the ice. And there's a lot of tough guys that play in the NHL. And that's not taking anything away from the other guys, but you think you're indestructible. You think that you can jump off buildings and you're Superman and you're not going to get hurt and you're going to play forever and all those things. And you don't think an awful lot about the future. I didn't. I was just enjoying the moment. It was a great moment. It was a time in my life where it was arriving at a dream that I had set for myself as a boy, to play in the National Hockey League. And there's a difference between making the National Hockey League and staying in the National Hockey League. I didn't want to go and have one good year, or even some guys play for 20 games and then all of a sudden something happens. So by this time I had established myself as a player. I knew what it took to be a player and what it took to stay there, the consistency of the game, the discipline of the game. And you're kind of, like I said, feeling indestructible. When we had days off, Glenn Sather was there that one year. We had a bunch of cowboys. When I was growing up, I wanted to be a hockey player or a cowboy. I used to go to my grandfather's farm up in Grand Prairie, Alberta, and I learned to ride horses and, you know, rope cows and ride steers and all that stuff. I broke my arm when I was 12 years old. I roped a calf by myself out in the field, and I was only probably 100 pounds, and this calf was like 600 pounds. And had my cousin not come along, this calf was dragging me around the field because I had roped it, and I had tied the lasso around my cast on my broken arm. So this calf was dragging me all over the field. Anyhow, in St. Louis, we had a guy, his name was Cletus Halling, and he ran quarter horses. That's what I did. And when we had a day off, Glenn Sather, Gasser, you know, Floyd Thompson, there was a couple of other guys. We would go out there and ride these cutting horses for the trainers. Cutting horses like an athlete that jumps all over the place, and it's really fun to ride. And they need to get a lot of work. So actually, that was part of our off day stuff. And so when the thing happened with Bobby, all of a sudden, that mental thought about, we're going to last forever. You know, everything's going to be the same forever. and all of a sudden he was gone. And that kid's face came up in front of me. And it made me start looking at life at a little more of a deeper level, you could say, I guess. You know, there's a lifestyle that comes along with being a professional athlete, and you try not to. One of the things my dad said to me was, try and stay normal. And I tried to do that. I tried to be normal, a normal guy. I tried not to think that I was any better than anybody else. I tried to treat people, fans, anybody, the Zamboni driver, just the same as I would treat, you know, the top player on the team. So I tried to live like that, and it was kind of ingrained in me. I was really fortunate to have the parents that I had, and my upbringing that I had. My dad was very strict on us. He was in the Army. He was a staff sergeant in the Army, and you know, we worked hard. The first car I had to pay for and buy it off him, and I had a paper route to get my first motorcycle, and you know, nothing was really handed to us during that time. So, but when all of a sudden Bobby was gone, I didn't know where he went, and I didn't know. It could have been me just as easy as him. Could have been any one of us, because we're all, you know, just doing our thing. And you're married, and without knowing it, you're fairly selfish. Not to the point of people noticing that, I don't think, but to the point of saying, okay, you go sleep with the baby. I got a game today, so I gotta lie down and don't bother me. And you know, I've been on a road trip, and I'm back home now, and I don't want to go out for dinner. I want to stay home, and you know, so it's a little bit of a selfish. A lady that marries a professional athlete, even though they're really good guys and they try as hard as they can, when people get yelling and screaming about you all the time, all of a sudden you're thinking, why is she asking me to take out the garbage? You know, I'm a St. Louis Blue. So you gotta kind of put this all in perspective as you're playing. And it made me think a little bit stronger about my marriage. Not that it was bad, but I think I could have been a little more empathetic. I went to a Christian athletes convention in 1980 when we were going through our time that we were looking at a different way of life, the Christian side of it. And we did a marriage counselor did a thing on husband and the wife. And the guy was surprised because I was below the scale on empathy. And it wasn't just empathy. It wasn't empathy for me, but for if somebody was hurt, I would say, just suck it up and play. And I got that from my sister. I have a sister that's 5 years younger than me that was crippled, that was in a wheelchair. She had polio, and her legs never developed. And I was outside playing hockey and playing football and baseball and all that stuff. And she could never, ever get out of this chair. She's still in a wheelchair today. She's a wonderful girl. She's had 2 kids and lives in Victoria, British Columbia, and was on the swimming team when she was a kid. I joked about the fact that because she didn't use her legs, she was quite powerful with her arms, because she had to use those for everything. When she wasn't in her braces and crutches, she was crawling with her arms. And I was the only guy in the National Hockey League that couldn't beat my sister in an arm wrestle because she was that tough. So, but it gave me, it helped me not to feel sorry for myself. It was a strong motivation for me for the Ironman streak, and I gave her a lot of credit for it. My mom was involved with the Ironman streak, and all these things were going through my mind as we went through this episode with Bobby. Then Diane was pregnant with their first child. Bobby Gassoff Jr. still lives in St. Louis and still does some things with the Blues and is around the guys and all that stuff. And it was a difficult time for me, and that was part of the reason why when I left St. Louis, I was kind of in a situation where I looked around and I had achieved everything that I wanted to achieve as a kid. There's a couple of places that you get to in life. Some of them is in the gutter, where you're, maybe an alcoholic, or you've got some vices that are controlling you and you're not controlling them. And I'm looking around and I'm seeing all the stuff that I have, and I'm still thinking there's something missing. There's something missing in my life. I wasn't an unhappy guy, but there was still something missing in my life. And I thought it was a Stanley Cup. I thought that's what was going to do it. So at that point, I was probably, I think I was just over 30, 31, 32, somewhere like that. And I thought, I'm not going to play that much longer. Maybe this thing that I'm missing is a Stanley Cup. And that's when I decided that possibly it would be better for me I was only going to play a couple more years. Maybe I would go to a place where they would have an opportunity to win a Stanley Cup. And at that time, you had to be traded you couldn't just go and sign with a player. My contract was up. Emile Francis was the general manager, and we were a ways apart on what we were talking about as far as the team was concerned. So we both decided that it might be better that I go. And that's when I ended up going to Atlanta, to the Atlanta Flames. And when I got to Atlanta, Bobby McMillan was there. My wife was pregnant with our second daughter, and she had some problems with miscarriages, so she couldn't travel. So she stayed on the farm in St. Louis, and I went to Atlanta on my own. Mac was single. There was a bunch of different guys there, and they came to me and they said, we've got a little bit of a few strange guys on our team. We got some guys that are Christian guys. And, I had grown up going to Sunday school and going to church, and I thought, why would that be strange? And the guys that were telling me this were the guys that had been there for a couple of years. And it probably over the years gets exaggerated, but we had some guys on that team, a guy named Kenny Houston, Eric Vale had won the Rookie of the Year with Atlanta, and they were all great players. But Eric Vale had the record for drinking something like 50 beers after a game. And these guys are telling me these Christian guys are strange. And I said, don't you think that might be strange? That this guy's drinking 50 beers after a game? And that's not every game, and that may be exaggerated, like they say, but there was two separate groups of guys. The other guys was John Pronovo, who I'd known from playing against in Pittsburgh, and was another great player, scored 50 goals in the league, and Paul Henderson. So as we started the season, I said to myself, listen, I'm not going to make a decision on one way or the other. I'm not going to get into a group. I'm just going to play the game, and I'll go for lunch with whoever wants to go, and hang around with whoever wants to hang around with me. But I'm now not with my wife, so I'm single, and I'm hanging around with the single guys, and they're going to the bars, and then the next day we'd go on a road trip, and I'd go for dinner with Paul Henderson and John Pronovo, and there was something different about them. There was something different about the way they treated their wives and the way they looked after themselves and all that stuff. So I just kind of sat back and watched this as time was going on, and it didn't really have any effect, I don't think, on the team. The team was fairly tight, but the thing about the team was that they had gone out and recruited. They got myself and some other guys, and some of the guys that were on the team, Guy Chenard and some of these other guys that were on the team. They were all high point scorers. So all of a sudden we had a team of probably the most talented guys that I'd played with, but none of us were used to being a checker. I mean, we knew how to check, but that wasn't our number one goal. Our number one goal was to score goals. So what do you do with the goal scorer? You put them on the power play. Well, we had probably all 10 of the guys that played forward for the Atlanta team that year could have played on the power play. So somebody had to change their game a little bit. And that was tough. That was tough on you want to be out there all the time. So the season was a little bit up and down. Al McNeil was the coach of the team, and he had been very successful with the Montreal Canadiens, and he was struggling a little bit. We were struggling a little bit, and it just got to the point where I finally went to the coach, and I said, listen, we've got all these guys on the team. Put me with a couple of really good checking guys, and I'll play that role for you if you want. So I ended up that season, I think I only scored 17 goals that season. And they called me in at the end of the season, and we sat down, and they said, you didn't have the year that we thought you were going to have. I'd always scored 30 goals all the time. And I said, have you ever looked at my record as far as my goals are concerned? And they said, oh yeah, we've done that. And I said, do you know how many power play goals I usually score? Because I wasn't on the power play. And I said, check and see. I usually scored somewhere between 15 and 18 power play goals a year. So what's 18 plus 17? Add that up. I'm a 30 goal scorer, but I chose to take that job as a checker, and so that was a little bit how the year went. So, and it's always difficult when you get traded, because everything changes where you live, changes your friends, change all the places that you are. And at the time, my wife was going to have the baby. It was kind of 3/4 of the way during the season, and she was in the hospital with her pregnancy, because she had an incompetent cervix, and it was the baby she'd lose the baby, so they had to keep her in the hospital to do that. While she was in the hospital, she was in there, and there was a Catholic lady that was sitting beside her, and she gave her a little pin that she was talking about, St. Christopher's pin or something like that, and they were praying together about making sure that this baby was going to be okay. On the other side of it, I was now going to the bars one night, and the next night these guys were asking me to go to a Bible study, and I kind of wasn't ready for that yet. But the more I hung around with these guys, the more I realized that they had their lives together pretty good, and it might be something interesting that I would like to look at. At the end of the season, they had a Christian conference in Phoenix, Arizona, and they invited me to go out there. And we went to the conference. And when we got to the conference, a guy named Darcy Rhoda was with us. There was a bunch of football guys and big guys, linemen, and holding hands with their wives and carrying their little Bibles around. And it was kind of strange, because the thing started at 9 o'clock in the morning, and it was classroom all day long. And they said if you didn't enjoy doing the classes, you could just go to the first class and then go sit by the pool. So we decided that's what we were going to do, because this schedule was pretty hectic. We went to the first class in the morning, the first day, and there was a guy there, was a marriage counselor. It was a guy named Gary Smalley, and he had written some books on marriage. And that's one of the things that I was dealing with. I wasn't dealing with drinking and all that stuff. I was dealing with the fact that I was a father and a husband, and there was times when I wasn't living like that. So this guy was speaking about, you expect to go to these Christian deals and they're always telling you you're going to go to hell and whatever's happening. And he was talking about camping with your family and how you're supposed to treat your wife and all those different things, how you're supposed to raise your kids. And it was like there was nobody else in the room. It was like he was speaking right to me. And that day, Bev and I got together, and she had heard the same thing we had. We never missed a meeting. We couldn't get enough of what they were teaching, backing it up with scripture, but it was normal stuff. It was just, stuff that everybody needs to learn as a marriage counselor or whatever. And at that point, I decided that void that was in my life, that I was trying to fill with motorcycles and cars and ice hockey and scoring goals and winning Stanley Cups, that void in my life was a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And when I filled that void with that, that's when I felt fulfilled. Because what they were teaching us is we're body and mind and spirit. And we go to school and we get our heads all, we become whatever. We get degrees and become a lawyer or doctor or whatever. We're an athlete. We take care of our bodies and we go to the gym and we work out. But we kind of think that the spiritual side is going to take care of itself just naturally. And it's no different than your mind and your body. It needs to have some exercise, and you need to find out some information about it. So when I found out that information about it, I realized that God had come into my life, and now I was going to try and live by his rules and his laws. But not only was I going to try and live by him, because I had that strength inside of me, he was going to give me the strength to make those decisions. So that's when I became a Christian. And so when I look back on it, that was the main reason why I left St. Louis. It had nothing to do with hockey. My wife and I redid our vows and all that stuff, and our marriage was healed. All the things that I wanted to be as a husband and a father started to come together. It wasn't just like overnight, but it was things that I was studying, and that's kind of all started from the Bobby Gassoff thing.
You think about, so, I mean, there's been different things said about it. One of the things said was one of the reasons that you were traded was the lawsuit. I don't want to get into it. I know that's a personal issue, but but to hear what you say, I mean, it really puts a different light on the things that were going on. And I figure that's going to cut on me. But at the same time, I look at and I hear the amazing story that you tell, and it just, like I said, I'm almost speechless, Garry.
Well, the lawsuit, Diane was a good friend of ours, and Bev and Diane, when we went on road trips, Bev used to go over to Diane's house, and we spent a lot of time together with Bobby and Diane. They used to come out to the farm all the time. Diane, I think, is from Belleville, Illinois, or on the other side of not in Missouri. And Bev was taking lessons, tennis lessons, with John Connors, who was Jimmy Connors' brother. And we got to know those guys, and I think they went to school with Diane. So they were kind of hanging around a little bit. And I was a little bit of a tennis fan. So when Jimmy would come into town, he'd go to the games. And we actually ended up, when I went to England, I ended up going and spending some time with Jimmy at Wimbledon.
Oh, nice.
It was some really neat experiences. But we were really close to Diane and Bobby, and it was really hard. But when you have people around you that are saying to you, you know, you need to look at this thing, and maybe there should be a lawsuit. Maybe you should do something. I never ever blamed her for doing any of that stuff. We had insurance, and I know I didn't do anything wrong. I tried to stop Bobby from going on the bike, but they were trying to say in the lawsuit that I didn't provide a helmet for him, and I made him go on the road and all those different things. So I think for me, it was just a non-issue. I just didn't want it to be an issue as far as saying bad things and getting involved. So I never really even gave it any thought, other than the fact that there was a lawsuit.
Well, like I said, I mean, I didn't. It was up to you to bring it up. I mean, to get into it. But it was. I apologize. I'm going to send this over to Fox now. He's got some interesting questions to ask you. So, Jeremy, go ahead.
Well, I was looking at further, or like more towards the end of your career, you were in Edmonton,
right,
and you got to play with the Great One before he was the Great One. And of course, Jari Kurri and Grant Fuhr and all these guys that came out of Edmonton.
Mark Messier.
Messier, yeah. When Gretzky was first in the league, he was a young kid. Was he a cocky SOB? Was he a cool, calm kid? Like,
he was a skinny little rat, is what he was. I met Gretz. And I'm not sure what year it would have been, and you guys would know more about the World Hockey Association than I would, and time frame. I know is just before the 80s, but for some reason, I'm thinking 78, somewhere around there, the NHL got together and said, okay, we're gonna kind of recognize the WHA. Before, it was a fight between the two organizations, because they were going to put the WHA was going to put the NHL out of business. I don't think people know it, but what the WHA did was they went ahead, whether a guy had a contract or not, they went ahead and drafted anybody, like they drafted Derek Sanderson from Boston. And then they go to Derek, and Philadelphia drafted him. And then they go to Derek and say, okay, we're going to give you $1 million. Well, we weren't making we were making great money compared to what people were making at that time. But when somebody comes to you and you're making, say, $100,000 a year or $150,000 a year, and they come and say, we want to pay you $1 million, like they did with Bobby Hull, well, he's going. I was drafted, I think, by the Cincinnati Stingers, and they came and they offered me some big bucks to leave St. Louis. I had just signed a contract with St. Louis, and I said to them, you know, I've got a contract, and one of the things that I've learned from my parents is, if I've signed a contract, I've given them my word. I shook their hand, and I'm not leaving St. Louis just for money. So I could have left then at the World Hockey just for money. But that league, they allowed exhibition games all of a sudden. So St. Louis, we ended up going to Indianapolis, where Gretz was before he got traded to Edmonton, and we played the Indianapolis Racers at an exhibition game. I took the opening face-off against Wayne. He was probably, I guess he may be 18 at the time. And I'm looking around and I'm thinking to myself, this guy's going to get killed. He's like 160 pounds. He's, like I said, he's a skinny little guy. Yeah. And he ended up, I think they beat us. We had a lot of training camp guys in the lineup and all that stuff too. But they ended up beating us 7-4, I think the score was. And he had like 6 points. When you watched Orr play, he wound up behind the net, and the people were yelling and screaming, and away he went, and he'd skate through the whole team and score a goal. Gretz was different. he was just kind of in quiet zones, and he would be all by himself over there, and all of a sudden Garry Curry would give him the puck, and then he'd pass it over to the other side. Semenko was playing with him at the time, and he was protecting Wayne. And all of a sudden, Wayne would be in front of the net, and boom, the puck would be in the net. So there were times when, as he got older and got a little more confidence and stuff, but he was a different kind of a highlight player than even Gordie Howe that I'd played with before. He was a power forward that dominated guys and crushed guys in the corner and crushed guys in front of the net. And this Gretzky was just kind of floating around like a little butterfly. He was like Muhammad Ali.
That's awesome.
So it was fun to be there. You know, I often wish I was it hadn't got to the point yet where the training off the ice in the summertime, getting a personal trainer, going to the gym, doing your extra stuff. My training was riding a bicycle. I never drank, so I didn't have to worry about, you know, my eating habits or stuff that is going to put you out of shape like that. But I wasn't much of a gym guy. I went to the gym from the time I was probably 15 to maybe 18 until I got into the league. And then I was playing so much that my cardio was great, and I was naturally a strong guy. But now all of a sudden they had all these opportunities to, you know, you could go in and get a massage before the game and get your legs all worked on and that type of thing. So I missed that part of the game. And when I came to training camp, we did a thing called a VO test. A VO test is you put a face mask on, and they hook you up to a machine, and you sit on a stationary bicycle, and it's a 12-minute test. They were and they'd give us all. We didn't know anything about it, but they said, okay, the top guy in Russia, the best guy in the world, these Olympic athletes, they're somewhere around 70, 75 on this VO test. And they keep pumping up by the time you finish this test, you're totally exhausted. It's like playing 3 hockey games in a row. But anyhow, they take all these measurements and all these things. And I thought I was in pretty good shape. You know, I rode my bike all summer. I climbed mountains. I rode horses. I did all sorts of stuff. And when I went to camp, we did this VO test. And I think Gretz was 67, which was way up there. Garry Curry was 65. Mark Messier was 55. And then all the other guys on the team were below that. And I was like 45. And I was used to being the best guy on the team and top shape and all that stuff. And I thought, holy man, you know, something, either I'm getting older or something's happening. So I started riding the bike. I wasn't playing as much because I was playing behind Gretz and these guys on the team. I wasn't getting as much ice time. So in between periods, I started riding my bicycle, and they were going to do the test again in December. So I said, this can't happen. You know, I'm a professional athlete, and this guy's not going to blow me out of the water. So I started riding the bike and doing extra stuff. I actually even bought one of the bikes that they were doing the test on, and I was riding it at home. And when they did the test in December, I had pumped myself up to 60.
Nice.
So I was able to sit on the bench, not get a lot of ice time. Gretz changed when he wanted to. He played and he was on the ice, and when he wanted to come off the ice, he came off, and somebody else. So I finally said I was playing with Mark Messier. Mark wasn't a centerman yet; he was a left winger, and Glennie Anderson, who is a super player, he was my right winger, and I was playing on that line, and I was the second line, and then the third line. We had the third line, and I finally went to Glenn and I said, "Listen, I'd rather play on the third line because Gretz plays through his wingers, the first line. He plays through Semenko and Garry Curry, and then they Mess and Andy change, and Gretz doesn't come off, so he plays with those two guys, and then it's time for the third line to go on. So my centerman job was behind Gretzky. I wasn't getting any ice time, so I asked him to play on the third line. So, but it was fun to watch him. He was an amazing player. All those guys. It was a fun team. It was like playing on a junior team. After when practice was over, we thought everybody would the coaches would leave the ice. We'd take our sticks and we throw them at center ice. Now, at this time, I'm probably 35. I'm getting 34, 35 years old, and we'd throw our sticks in center ice, and Mess or Gretz or somebody would get down on their knees, and they'd throw 3 sticks over here and 3 sticks over there, and that was your team. So we played 3-on-3 inside the zone, way before they did 3-on-3, like they're doing it today for overtime. And we just stayed out there. We had the ice as long as we wanted. We were playing against Gretz and Mess, and Grant Fuhrer was on one net, and Andy Moog was in the other net, and we just was like a bunch of kids just playing hockey. And that's how I got myself back into shape to be able to play. But I wish I had been at the top of my game to have played with all those young guys at that particular time.
Yeah, you missed the cup run by 1 year, right? 1 or 2 years?
Yeah, I did. Actually, you know what? I played for the Toronto Maple Leafs the year after they won the cup in 67 or 66, somewhere around there. And then I played with Edmonton the year before they won the cup. I retired in 83, and then I did the television work for Edmonton for a while until I went overseas for a little bit. But it was a fun team to be around. They were good guys. They weren't. They didn't have a big head. They were just having fun.
That's awesome.
Yeah. I know you never won a cup, but has an announcer and that winning the cup, being on the announcer for Edmonton, were you able to get a ring with Edmonton as an announcer?
No, I didn't want a ring. Okay. I don't want a ring unless I'm part of the reason why they won the cup. I don't even take my picture with the Stanley Cup, and I'm excited that St. Louis won it and all that stuff. But if you're a hockey player, if you want the Stanley Cup, you want your picture taken with it. You want to be a figure in why they won it. So I was involved with all the after times in '84 when they did it, and then the next year I went away and played in Scotland.
Well, '84, that's the year that they ended up making it so the cup now had to have a Bill Picard got his job because of the team in '84.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, so he dragged the cup around because of that '84 team.
Yeah, the cup apparently ended up in a few gentlemen's clubs, and
yeah, it was everywhere.
And the NHL wasn't too happy about that. So that Gretzky, I remember hearing Gretzky joking about that. We're the reason Phil Picard has a job. I think they actually left it on a bridge too.
Oh yeah, these guys were. After the season, you go crazy for a little while.
Yeah.
But it was another learning experience for me as well, because I was in the room with the cup on the night, just like with St. Louis in the dressing room, but in Edmonton, and guys were going crazy and getting pictures and doing all that stuff, and it was really exciting. No doubt, it was exciting. The next day, after that night, we come back to the rink to do some stuff with the team and, get our stuff organized for the summer and, that type of thing. And there was some guys walking around kind of like saying, is this it? Like, I wanted to win a Stanley Cup. Every kid that plays the game wants to win the Stanley Cup, and not that there isn't some excitement from it, but that excitement doesn't last like you think it does. And that's what I got out of being around the Stanley Cup for those days that the Oilers had it, and the Stanley Cup, and that's what I was looking for, and that's what I was expecting to turn my life around. And it wasn't the Stanley Cup. It was my relationship with God that did that. So it was another learning experience for me.
One more, another question for you. Okay, one more, and I keep asking. Were you in in Boston for Game 7?
No, I was in Canada.
Okay.
Yeah, we were still coaching. We were still playing. Our team was in the playoffs. We were somewhere in British Columbia.
Okay.
We got to watch part of the game because we were in the playoffs. So in the playoffs in our league, I was with the Banff Hockey Academy. There's Academy League in Canada, in Western Canada, with teams in Vancouver and Penticton and British Columbia, and Kelowna and out in Vancouver. The Canadian Sports Hockey League, Academy Sports Hockey League, and we play 2 games in a day, so there wasn't time to be sitting watching TV unless you got your times right. But I was watching it as much as I could, highlights and all that stuff.
Well, I mean, you did tell us that you felt like when they won that cup that you won the cup too, and you know, you're not the only one that said that. And I got to ask this question, and then I'll let Jeremy ask one. Do you have any Brett Hull stories?
You know, I didn't. Brett was a little younger than I was.
Oh, I know that.
I didn't play with him. I have more Bobby Hull stories than I have Brett Hull stories. I have a few of those, and some of them I couldn't tell you.
Yeah.
And there's probably some Brett Hull stories out there that shouldn't be on TV.
Yeah.
You know, if you're trying to be a role model for young hockey players.
Yeah.
You know, Brett's a great guy and did a tremendous job with the St. Louis Blues, and you know, fought through a lot of adversity. You know, he played in Penticton, British Columbia, played junior there, and I know he got traded from Calgary, and when he got traded from Calgary, he might have been a little bit overweight when he got traded out of there, but you know, he figured it out and became a prolific goal scorer and a huge player for the St. Louis Blues. So, but I don't really have any. I mean, I have some nice ones. I've heard the stories from Kelly Chase and some of the guys at the alumni thing, but you know, I had my grandson at the All-Star game. He was 8 years old at the time, and got to get his picture with the Stanley Cup and all that stuff. And he's around all the guys, and Brett treated him really well. You know, they had their picture taken with him, and you know, he took him around and met some of the guys, and you know, he was just. That's what I look at. I don't look at players the way they treat other players. I mean, we're at an even level, and they're usually pretty good guys to each other. I look at players how they treat the fans, how they treat the lower people, people that are looking up to them. And I was impressed the way he handled himself with the people around.
Yeah, Brett, from what I've heard, and I know I've heard both sides of this. I've heard where Brett was not very good with fans, but it sounds like in his later years, he's gotten much more comfortable with fans being around him all the time. You know? Well,
you know, people have different personalities. There's different personalities for guys, and some guys are just, it's not built in their personality to have somebody all the time in your face, all the time, you know. I shouldn't say bugging you, but for me, I never got tired of that. I always thought that it only took 30 seconds for me to be nice to somebody, sign an autograph. That 30 seconds would be the time that they say, hey, I met this guy and he was a pretty good guy. Or I could take that 30 seconds and throw the guy's book down or throw his pencil away or whatever and say, you know, I don't have time for you. And all of a sudden, maybe I'm ruining a young kid's desire to be a hockey guy, or maybe he's going to have a different effect on whether he wants to go to St. Louis Blues games or not. But it was just, it almost has to be a natural thing with you.
Yeah. Well, I got to meet Brett, and I'm sorry, Jeremy. I got to meet Brett before a game after the Gulf War, and him and Adam Oates signed the 75th anniversary puck I had. So that's one of my great memories. Jeremy, you got anything? You got something else you'd like to ask?
I do. You mentioned going overseas to play hockey. in Scotland and in England. What made you go overseas to play?
Well, actually I was in Edmonton, and I was doing the television stuff, and I was playing, probably they were doing all these media games and different games, and I probably was playing, 50 games, and I still loved to play. And I had a job, I had a really interesting job. The television stuff was only, a game a week, or sometimes you'd miss a week because there was a game somewhere else where they weren't televising it or whatever. So it wasn't really a full-time job. It was more of a, when you could fit it in. So a guy came to me and he said, would you like to be an international trade consultant? And I said, well, what is that? They said, well, the World Bank and the International Development Bank in Washington have all these projects that are all over the world. And what you do is, with companies like where we were living, we were in Alberta, so a lot of the companies were oil companies and oil business and all that stuff. They would be doing some job in Africa, in Senegal, Africa, or they'd be doing a job in, the job I looked at was a road job, a road company in Solomon Islands in the middle of the Pacific. We had to fly from Edmonton to Vancouver to Hawaii to Fiji to the Solomon Islands. And my job was to go over there, meet all the premier of the country, find out what this job was all about. And then I would bring a company from Edmonton over to see if they could bid on this job. So I did that for a little bit. And the guy that I was working with said, well, we're doing all this international stuff. Why don't we check out doing some international stuff with hockey? And I said, yeah, what do you want to do? He said, well, let's start an agency. So he said, okay. So we sent out a bunch of brochures and faxes and stuff saying that we were going to help kids go play overseas. So it was the start of the season. It was like in 15th of August. So school was starting. I had 3 girls. School was starting in 2 weeks. And this guy calls me out of the blue and he says, I'm in Toronto right now and I'm looking at some players, but I don't like what I'm seeing. And I'm going to fly to Edmonton and I want you to pick out some players for me to take to Scotland. And I said, sure, we're practicing right now. And I was still, like I say, we had the ice from, I think it was like 11 o'clock till 1 o'clock in the morning out in this small little district out in Sherwood Park in Alberta, or outside of Edmonton. And Messier was playing and Grant Fuhr was in net. And, there was some college kids there. There were some junior kids there. And I played. So I said, here's a list. This guy flew in. I gave him a list of guys. So we played scrimmage. There was no referees. You just throw the puck out, just like when you're kids. Right. And we played, and I gave him this list of guys. And then now by the time we finished, it's like 2 in the morning. We go back to the office at 3 in the morning. And this guy from Scotland, his name was Tom Stewart. I said, what do you think about these guys? And he says, what are you doing? I said, I'm the agent. And he says, well, you were the best player out there. He says, you want to go? Do you want to play? He says, you want to be my player coach? And I said, well, that's a shock. I said, that's not what I was doing today. I was trying to get these other guys to get a chance to go to Europe. So I said, school starts in 2 weeks. I got 3 kids. I got to go home and talk to my wife. So I went home and I said to Bev, the craziest thing happened here, and this is like at 4 in the morning now, the same night, because I'm reeling. So right. I said to Bev, he wants me to go to Scotland and be the player coach for the Dundee Rockets. And I didn't know anything about the British League or anything about that. So I said, here's what we'll do. You guys can't go because school's starting in 2 weeks. They can't go to school in Scotland. So we'll give them such an unbelievable contract that if they take it, we'll go. And if they don't, then I'll stay home and we'll do what we're doing now, and that'll be it. So their training camp was in Sweden, and we always like to travel. So their training camp was in Sweden. So they said, okay, Bev could come over to Sweden with you. You could spend 2 weeks in Sweden at training camp. Then you can come back. We've got a little break before the season, so we'll send you to Paris for that little break there. And then the kids can come over 3 times, come over at Christmas. You can go back and spend Christmas in Canada. Then you can come back. Your wife and all the kids can come back at Easter again. And then at the end of the season, you can go to Greece. And that's all part of your contract. And we'll give you cash money. so
that's a heck of a contract.
Yeah. So I said, let's forget about the hockey. I said, let's just go to Paris and go to Sweden and all that stuff. So I ended up accepting that. I lived in a 400-year-old apartment in Dundee, Scotland. Met some great people, some great hockey guys, and Bev did all her trips and brought the kids back over again and back over. And at the end of the season, I lived in an old apartment. Like I said, there was no room for hardly anybody. Mm-hmm. And I told them that I wasn't going to come back unless they could get me a house. And it was really tough to get housing there. And a team in Peterborough, England, which is about 60 miles north of London, they called me and said, listen, we heard you weren't going back to Dundee. Do you want to go to Peterborough? And I said, well, I'm not going to negotiate with you. I want to make sure that I get a house. If you can get me a house, I'll come and play. And they got me a house. So that's when my family moved over, and my wife taught aerobics and went around to all the little villages and taught the women aerobics. And we traveled all over the country, and we went to Greece like 6 or 7 times, all the Greek islands and Istanbul. And, it was a really, really unique experience, only because I could play hockey a little bit. And so we just went for the adventure.
Awesome.
For me, I think life is an adventure. And I sit back now and I think, wow, I would never, ever have wanted to say no to that adventure that we went on. Oh. And then when I came back, actually Glenn Sather called me at 4:00 in the morning and asked me if I wanted to come back and coach in Phoenix. And that's how I ended up coming back to North America. I coached the Phoenix Roadrunners in the International League. So then I started coaching over here.
Nice.
You have had an amazing life, and we're running out of time, but I got one more question to ask you, and I kind of brought this one up.
Okay.
I brought this one up early. I brought this one up offline. There was a year that you guys wore yellow skates.
Yeah.
What was that about?
Okay. All right. So I'll tell you that before that, and you mentioned that in the text when we talked back and forth. My big year in Detroit, I scored 42 goals in Detroit. Phil Esposito had 43. I had 42. That was the highest in the league. And I was like 22 years old. Bauer came to me and said, would you work with us and we'll give you skates and all that stuff. After the season was over, and this was like 3 years before these colored skates in St. Louis, maybe 2 years. They came to me and they said, we're going to send you a pair of skates for the summer to what you're going to wear at hockey school. They sent me a pair of red skates because I was playing with Detroit. So now I broke these red skates in, and I came to training camp, and I've got these red skates. So all of a sudden we played our first exhibition game, and they pulled me off the ice. The NHL pulled me off the ice, the referees, and they said, what are you doing with those things? I said, well, I'm working for Bauer, and they're doing some skates. And they said, the only way you can wear those red skates is if your whole team wears them. This was before any of the other teams were doing anything. So I went in the dressing room, and the guy came in the dressing room, and I sat beside Gordie. Gordie Howe sat on one side, and Alex Delvecchio was over here, Frank Mahovlich, and the guy came in and he said, so what do you guys think about these red skates that Gary's got? And they said, we ain't wearing red skates. We're done. We're not doing that. Excuse me. So they threw it out. They threw the skates out. The league wouldn't let them do it. 3 years later, this was when I was in St. Louis, all of a sudden certain teams, I think the Oakland Skates had white skates and the St. Louis Blues had blue and yellow skates. And the whole team decided that they were going to wear them. So we wore those skates. We had a guy on our team named Brian Ogilvie. And he came to training camp. He was a really good player. But every time they told him that they weren't going to send him down, he wasn't really on the team yet, but they were going to send him down, he would go down to the minors and he'd have these colored skates and they'd paint him black. So he could play down there. He couldn't play with colored skates in that league. Then he'd come back up to the Blues and they'd paint him blue and yellow. And then they'd send him down to the minors and they'd paint him black again. So he did that like 4 times and now his skates weighed like 50 pounds. So because of keeping the skates looking sharp, and Tommy Woodcock was the one that was keeping the skates all polished up, and every time you got hit with a puck on the yellow part, it would make a black mark, and it was just way too much trouble to keep it going. But the only reason we did that is because the league said it was okay.
Wow.
Well, I got asked that question. That question was asked in St. Louis Blues hockey history on Facebook, and now I'm going to take this little expert of this video and put it in there so I can say I got the answer. Garry, you know, the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks that you and me have been talking have been amazing for me. I'm going to throw just a few more questions out, kind of like a name association. I'm going to throw some names out, and I want you to just tell me what you think about them real quick. And we'll start with the most recent one, Bobby Plager. Well,
Bobby was the ultimate St. Louis Blues. And every time I mention Bobby, I have to mention Bark. And I almost have to mention Noel Picard, and then Gary Saber. And then you can go down the list, Frank St. Marseille. And when I first went to that team, the family-oriented team that they had, and I can see why they were so upset when Red Berenson was traded for me, because it was a family, and Bobby was the jokester of the team. He was always doing jokes. I mentioned last week about a bunch of different stuff that went on away from the game. The game was really fun away from the game. The travel, the plane trips, you know, cutting the ties off and going with no shoes and all those things. I'm not sure if I mentioned the last time, and I keep forgetting the guy's name, but he was a French Canadian guy, and he had no teeth at all. And when he played and practiced, he took his teeth out, put them in a cup, left him in the dressing room, went and practiced, and then he'd put his teeth back in after the game was over. We were on a 2-week road trip out to Philadelphia and Boston and out east. And Bobby Plager and those guys took his teeth when he had them in the box, and they mailed them back home. So this poor guy had to spend 2 weeks with no teeth. He had to drink milkshakes. He couldn't eat anything, you know. So that's the kind of stuff that was going on with these guys. So Bobby is one of those guys that is just fun to be around.
Were you part of the Philadelphia massacre?
I was the start of it. I not so much that particular part, but I was taking a face-off with Bobby Clark. Mm-hmm. The game was 1-1. We were in the Spectrum. Al Arbor was coaching, and it was a time when the centermen were cheating all the time. Bobby Clark, every time he went into a face-off with this guy, he was cheating. And it was a big face-off. We were in our zone. There was about 10 seconds left to go in the second period, and the score was 1-1. And the referee's yelling at me, saying, "You straighten around, get your stick straightened around." I said, "I'm not straightening around until you straighten him around." And now I'm arguing with the referee. I'm arguing with the linesman. The referee comes down and he says, "Get in there. I'm going to give you a penalty." So the referee takes off. I turned to my winger. I think Mike Murphy was playing with me at the time. I can't remember. Anyhow, the guy dropped the puck when I wasn't looking. They threw the puck back to the point. The point drilled it from the point right into the top corner. and they scored. And our bench went nuts. Our team went nuts. Al went nuts. I stormed off the ice, went up into the dressing room, went off our bench and went up into the dressing room. And I sat down in the dressing room, and it was a big circular dressing room. And I'm sitting down, I threw my stick down, and I'm sitting there. And now I'm the only one in the dressing room. There's nobody else there. And all of a sudden I hear this big roar. So I come out, and at the spectrum, the dressing rooms were up top, and I looked around, and there was only one guy on, Al Arbor was the only guy on the ice. He was staggering around center ice. He had blood all over him. His jacket was ripped off. His tie was ripped off. His old gray t-shirt was hanging out, and he was staggering around center ice, and I couldn't find the players. I thought there was a brawl between the other team. Al had followed the referees off the end where the Zamboni was, and now the cops stepped in, the police stepped in from Philly, and they had billy clubs, and they had whacked Al Arbor on the head. That's why he was bleeding. They had whacked him with a billy club. So I come flying down. These guys are fighting underneath the Zamboni. I come flying down. I grabbed a cop from behind. I had the billy club and him from behind with the billy club on his throat. While I had this guy, a fan reached down out of the stands and grabbed me by the hair. I never wore a helmet, and he had a chunk of my hair, and he had a hold of my hair. Bobby Plager came along and broke this guy's arm that was holding my hair. So now this guy's really upset. He's big. He was a big guy. Now he's trying to throw chairs down on top of us while we're underneath the Zamboni. And then now somebody said, let's get out of here. So we all jumped out of the way, and we all ran up and locked ourselves in the dressing room. So Mr. Solomon happened to be there, and it was a long intermission. We thought they were going to cancel the game. And we went back in the dressing room, locked the door. And then about a half an hour later, we got a knock on the door saying, we're going to finish the game. So we ended up winning the game, I think 3-2. We were so pumped up. We didn't win a lot of games in Philadelphia that year, but that was one of them. And at the end of the game, they backed the paddy wagon up. I know White Pine Thompson, Floyd Thompson was in the middle of it. Phil Roberto was in the middle of it. Bobby Plager was in the middle of it. Bark was in the middle of it. But they only got certain numbers. And I think, John Arbor was another guy, one of our big defensemen. I think 3 of them went in the paddy wagon. We got on the bus. And when the bus was parked underneath where the Zamboni was to get away from the fans. And when we came outside of the rink on the bus just got pelted with beer bottles and cans, and all the windows were broken on the bus, and we headed out of there. And then we had this, they also went on the video and saw different guys. I was part of choking this one cop with the billy club. So we had to go visit, we had to go to Montreal and visit. The commissioner was Clarence Campbell at the time. Bark was our spokesman. He was the captain. And we all got fined, I think. We didn't get suspended. So it would have been the end of the Ironman streak if I had got suspended. But we all got fined, I think, a couple $1,000, and Mr. Solomon paid it. And it was a crazy night.
You guys are the reason that Philadelphia won cups, because their owner was so upset, says we're never going to let that happen again, and started the Broad Street Bullies. So
right.
That's just amazing. I got 2 names to throw out to you, and I think we talked a little bit about them, but we'll go with the first one. One of your coaches, Brian Suter.
Well, Brian, he never coached me.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
I played with Brian. He was an intense player, solid hockey player. He was a perfect example for a lot of kids that really don't start off with an awful lot of natural hockey ability. He just fought through everything that he did. He did it at a high intensity, and he was a great motivator for being a teammate and pumping up teams in the dressing room and that type of stuff. Now, I do know a bunch of guys that have played for Brian, and they say exactly the same thing. He was pretty intense.
Yep, I've heard that. I can't wait to talk to him. I'm hoping somehow, some way, I get the chance to interview him. The next one, Hall of Famer, Bernie Federko. Well,
and Bernie was the exact opposite of Brian. Bernie was laid back and smooth skating, could pass the puck through the eye of a needle. He was an unbelievable passer, one of the best. He was a passer like Gretzky. I mean, he could find, and they were really fortunate to have each other, to play with each other. Then you threw Wayne Babbage into the mix, and all of a sudden Wayne Babbage gets 50 goals because of Bernie's passing and Brian's toughness, and Brian just kept getting better and better and better. I remember the year that they brought him up. They brought Brian and Bernie and another guy named what was his name? Oh, anyhow, they were all on a line, playing in I think Salt Lake City, and they brought him up in a line. Rick Bourbonnais was the other guy. This was before Wayne had come, Wayne Babbage, and I kept thinking, wow, these guys are great. They've finally drafted some kids that are going to make the St. Louis Blues a better team and make it easier for me to play, because they don't have to key on me all the time. They're going to have to be watching these guys. But at the end of the summer, or at the end of the season, I was out in Alberta, and Brian was at his house. He has a hockey school out in Sylvan Lake, Alberta, and I went out to visit him, and he was scared to death that he was going to come to training camp and not make the team. And I said to Brian, that's the last thing you have to worry about. I said, you're going to have a great career. You just go to camp, enjoy yourself, and play the way you're playing, and you will never leave the National Hockey League. So, and that's what happened. So that whole family, I've been, like I mentioned before, I have a hockey school. We had a hockey school or a hockey academy in Banff, Alberta. And Bill Doherty was the owner of the hockey academy there. And I was, kind of his right-hand guy. So we did a lot of stuff within the Alberta. So I got to meet all the brothers, Richie, and I actually met Richie. What's Richie and there's so many of them, you lose track of them. But I met those guys when they were 12 years old, when the Blues played in Edmonton, and they came down to visit Brian
Richie
when we were
Ron?
playing. Yeah, Ron and Richie, the two twins. And then Dwayne, and one guy's coaching in Calgary. I mean, like I say, it's an amazing family to have, 7 guys in a family all make the National Hockey League. So Brian was the leader.
I mean, absolutely crazy. I sit here and I'm still in awe, man. You are an awesome man. Jeremy, any last words for Mr. Unger?
I've learned a lot, and it was an honor, sir.
Well, I was really blessed. I got to live a dream. I got to spend time in the National Hockey League, and not only the travel, but the people that you meet and the places that you got to play. I played hockey in 25 different countries, just from the fact that I could skate a little bit. So it's given me a really an adventurous life. I've had a chance to, and that's why I went to England and Scotland. Everything that I did was an adventure, and the only reason I got to do that was because I was a hockey guy, and I love seeing the excitement on people's faces when they say, "Holy, are you really Garry Unger?" And all these guys, I traveled with Gordie Howe and learned from him how he treated fans, and it's really fun to be able to have that ability to be able to make people smile.
Well, Garry, and you've seen me. I mean, for the past 3 weeks, I couldn't wipe the smile off my face if I wanted to. But I have to tell the one joke that I heard in the room that was about you, and you talked about, you guys busting each other's chops and that. The joke was the picture of that fight behind you. The only reason that it's there is because it was the only fight you were ever in.
Well, I'm going to give you some information here right now.
Yes, sir.
And I don't want it to be negative in any way.
No.
But I had more penalty minutes than Bob Plager. Barclay Plager had more penalty minutes than I did. But I think I was second, and I'm not going to go against Bobby Gassoff and those guys. But when I was first in the league, one thing that I learned was that I had to fight guys on every team, because guys want to fight guys that don't want to fight. And I fought Noel Picard. I fought Bobby. I fought Mark in practice. I fought many, many guys in the National Hockey League. And that's one of the things that people don't know about me is when I grew up as a junior kid playing in Canada, if I didn't learn to fight, I would have got killed and I would have never made it to the National Hockey League. So I have lost several fights, but they've all been to my wife.
Well, here you go. And I pulled this up real quick. For the Blues, you played 662 games consecutively. You never missed a game playing with the Blues. I think your streak was 909.
914.
914. It is second overall in the NHL. You scored 292 goals with the Blues, 413 overall. You had 283 assists, 391 overall, 575 points with the Blues for a grand total of 804 in your career. And with the Blues, you had 744 penalty minutes.
That's a lot of penalty minutes for somebody that doesn't fight.
Yeah, I no, and I only brought it up because I just thought the only reason I brought it up, Gary, was the way you guys, what I caught from that room was the way you guys admire and keep each other honest.
Yeah, that's true.
And that was just for me. It was amazing. And I'm not going to say who it is, but the person that I talked to in that room called me that day, and we're setting up something for next week.
Good for you. That's great.
And I'm hoping to get a few others. And again, Gary, I don't know what else to say, but thank you. Right?
Yes. Well, you're welcome. I enjoy doing this stuff. And like I say, St. Louis was a really special time of my life. I had two of my kids there, and I got married in St. Louis, and not in St. Louis, but while I was playing in St. Louis. And, you know, I was treated well by the fans, well by the city, and everybody that was involved with the Blues organization. It's always been a first-class organization, and it still is.
You know, I sit here in awe of you and your career, and just the willingness to sit and talk to us. It is my pleasure to make a little bit of an archive of Garry Unger and his time with the Blues and in the NHL. It's an absolute honor, sir. And I will say this, the next time that you go back for an alumni event, let me know, because I will do whatever I can to make sure I get to that event too.
Okay. Well, I know that next weekend they're having Bobby Plager's funeral.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I would never be able to make. I mean, I think that's going to be like invitation only.
That's going to be tough. It's going to be a tough time.
Yeah, you know, and if you need to just talk to somebody outside of the rink, please give me a call anytime, and we can talk. And you know, like I said, we're the friendship that you've shown me right off the get-go is amazing, and I can say nothing but thank you.
Well, I've enjoyed it as much as you have, so. Thanks for having me.
Oh, well, no
you
problem.
Guys,
absolutely.
You
well,
guys
everyone,
have a great night.
Yeah, well, everyone, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, Gary. This is Guy, the Hawaii Blues fan, with Jeremy, the Fox Miller, and an absolute amazing man, absolute amazing skater. And all I can say is thank you, sir, to Mr. Garry Unger, because Gary, you got to know that I'm bleeding blue with you, and I cannot wait to get to meet you and have you come on again on the Blue Note Fan Report. So aloha, mahalo, and until we meet again, aloha.